Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday morning. Us on the West Coast, it's 10 o'clock, and East Coast is starting in afternoon. Um, we're going to start with a short video, and then we'll give the
Hello everyone and welcome to today's session. We are Pre-Med CC, a student-led organization established in the fall of 2021. Our goal as an organization was to create an online community for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians.
And while we advertise our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to anyone. We realize that finding guidance and mentorship in a pre-med journey can be especially challenging for first-generation pre-med students, people that lack the financial resources, or just those that do not know people in the medical field.
One of the best parts about our events is that they are virtual, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home. We typically have events on Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. PST, and on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. PST.
If you aren't able to attend the event, all our sessions are uploaded on our YouTube channel. Many of our sessions will end with Q&A with our speakers. Any questions that you have can be put in the Q&A section on Zoom, and our team members will read them and have them answered.
After you have attended our event, you can log on to our website and complete the quiz, which will contain questions pertaining to our session today.
If you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you'll be awarded a 2-hour mentorship certificate to show that you attended our session today.
If you want to stay connected with our upcoming events or want to tell your pre-med friends about Pre-Med CC, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Pre-Med CC.
Dr. Jesse Ehrenfeld is the president of the American Medical Association. He also serves as a senior associate dean and tenured professor of anesthesiology at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Leading the Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin endowment, he directs his efforts toward clinical practice, teaching, and research. Additionally, Dr. Ehrenfeld holds adjunct professorships at Vanderbilt University and the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences. He contributes as a consultant to the World Health Organization Digital Health Technical Advisory Group, building on his prior roles with the Navy Surgeon General's Task Force and as a special advisor to the U.S. Surgeon General. Dr. Ehrenfeld's research, funded by the NIH and the Department of Defense, focuses on leveraging information technology to enhance surgical safety and patient outcomes. He is also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Medical Systems and contributes to shaping health policy through his involvement with the National Academy of Medicine. As the AMA's first openly gay president, Dr. Ehrenfeld champions LGBTQ plus rights and healthcare equity. His advocacy extends beyond the medical realm, recognized with the Sexual and Gender Minority Research Investigator Award from the NIH. Dr. Ehrenfeld's remarkable journey includes combat service in Afghanistan, where he captured the lives of LGBTQ plus individuals, earning accolades such as the White House News Photographers Association Award and an Emmy nomination. We are excited to have you, Dr. Ehrenfeld.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a treat to be with all of you today. Are you all seeing the screen that I'm sharing? Hopefully a slide. Wonderful. Let me start by just saying how pleased I was to get the invitation to join you all. And before I kind of get into my formal remarks, I just want to commend you, the leadership team of Pre-Med CC, for creating this forum that is so important. It's so important for support to create community for prospective medical students, because it is hard. It is hard, especially if you don't have a direct connection to the healthcare field as you're trying to navigate what it means, how do you do it, what are the considerations. And although you apply to medical school as an individual, and I hope everybody who's watching this applies, there's so many others that are involved when we decide to pursue the practice of medicine. You know, our moms, our dads, our sisters, our brothers, our spouses, our children, friends that are so dear to us. Like it or not, everybody's along for the ride when you make this decision. And the excitement and also the challenges of medical school really demands that you surround yourself with people who are going to encourage you, people who are going to support you, and remind you that you can do this, that you will do this, and frankly, that our world and our country need you to do this. So I'm really here today in my role as president of the American Medical Association to echo those statements, but also to share a bit about my journey along the way. And I won't sugarcoat the real challenges that face physicians in practice today and all of healthcare in this really complex moment in society. And we'll talk about some of that today. I also want to talk about some progress that we're making and some of the solutions that we're working towards every day. And I want to assure you that the work that you will do, we need. And I'm sure that you're eager to get involved in the issues that are important to you. And I'll tell you, medical students, as each of you someday will be, I hope, play such an important role as advocates in our community and within the American Medical Association. And I'll tell you, medical student advocacy within the AMA, and I'll talk more about what that is and looks like with our House of Delegates in a little bit, has been instrumental in a number of important policy changes that have improved undergraduate and graduate medical education, that have advanced racial justice, health equity for historically marginalized populations, policies that address burnout and depression and other mental health conditions that physicians and students far too often face. Advocacy around greater fairness in the National Residency Matching Program and in medical student loan repayment. So the AMA is really a platform where medical students, as you soon will be, can lend your voice to the policy issues that impact the profession and the practice of medicine, all to help create a better healthcare system that supports physicians and patients and everybody who needs it. So organized medicine at the local, state, or national level really reflects the issues that matter most to physicians in any moment in time. And the AMA has led critically important national health campaigns, reducing public smoking, championing childhood vaccinations, making seatbelts standard in American automobiles, ending the terrible practice of allowing smoking on airplanes. Now, these days, we're fighting a torrent of medical misinformation around science, vaccines, working to remove barriers to the delivery of high quality care, trying to improve physician training and education, trying to reverse the rise of chronic disease, burnout in medicine. And then twice a year, doctors from every specialty in every corner of the country, including our medical students, gather to tell us what to pursue next. What challenges should we be taking on? What injustices should we fight? And it's no secret that the last few years have been really challenging for physicians and students and our country. Attacks on science, increasing practice burdens, third-party interference in the practice of medicine, physician and other healthcare worker shortages. How do we address all of these challenges? How do we move medicine forward in this really difficult environment? We do it through advocacy. On all of those issues I just mentioned, the AMA is deeply engaged in driving our path forward. We're advocating for physicians and patients, and we're working in partnership with others to create stronger, healthier communities. So with that in mind, in my talk today, I'd like to take a little bit of a look at the current landscape in medicine, some of the pain points that physicians are experiencing, our continued efforts to create a more equitable and a more diverse workforce, and how the AMA is working in partnership with others to advance medical practice through the design of new digital tools, including AI. And I'll highlight some of the AMA's top advocacy priorities, show how they support physicians and patients. I'll look at how medical students and young physicians can influence change in medicine. And I want to explore, again, how we're driving the future of medicine through improved innovation, including AI. I see patients a day a week, and that's a picture, obviously, with me and some of my colleagues in an operating room where I practice anesthesiology. So I have a very formal academic CV. It is 96 pages. It is available for download on request, but please do not print it, because if you print it somewhere, a tree in a forest will start crying. But I went to medical school at the University of Chicago. I did my residency, fellowship, and joined the faculty at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. I did a Master of Public Health at the Harvard School of Public Health. I then went to Vanderbilt University and I ran our informatics research division for 9 years. And then in 2019, I was recruited to my current job in Wisconsin, where I'm speaking to you today from Milwaukee, where I'm a senior associate dean at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and I lead the Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin Endowment, the state's largest health philanthropy. Along the way, I decided to join the Navy. I spent 10 years as a reservist. I was deployed in 2014, 2015 to Kandahar, Afghanistan, where I took care of a lot of wounded service members, as well as our allies and some enemy combatants. And woven throughout my journey really is a thread around research, health equity, and policy. And you can see that in some of the organizational affiliations. My work with the World Health Organization, AMI, the AMA, a lot of that is around public policy related to standards for technology, a passion of mine, certainly. So I thought I'd share a few pivotal moments in my career and sort of how they've prepared me. I don't think of myself as coming from a military family. Many of you may, but that was just never a part of my identity. That being said, my dad was in the Army in the Vietnam era for a couple of years as a dentist. Both my granddads were in the military. And actually on my mom's side of the family, we have an ancestor who was a medical officer in the Revolutionary War and served under George Washington. But in spite of those connections and that history, I just didn't have that identity or purpose growing up in high school or college. In fact, I went to a Quaker college and there wasn't a whole lot of military activity because of that affiliation. But at the end of my residency, 2008, I was called. I was just really inspired, and I trained at one of the best teaching hospitals in the nation in Boston. And I said to myself, you know, you see what's happening overseas, you see the harm that our service members put themselves in front of. And I thought, why shouldn't, you know, our service members who put in their lives on the line have somebody like me, an extraordinarily well-trained physician working at one of our nation's most prestigious trauma centers, caring for them on the front line. So I went ahead and signed up, received a commission as a direct commissioned officer in the reserves. I was not smart enough to get the Navy to pay for medical school or do loan repayment. In retrospect, I should have. I'm happy to take questions about that at the end. But it's been an important part of my journey. I got to deploy in 2014, 2015, and there are at least 3 service members who are home with their families that wouldn't have survived if I hadn't been there to take care of them and stabilize them, take them to emergency surgery, and get them flown out. And the other unexpected component of my work in the military was to be an advocate. And while I was deployed, I encountered and became friendly with a transgender service member, an incredibly brave airman. And although Don't Ask, Don't Tell had gone away, the prohibition on transgender service had not. And so I was able to work with that airman in the New York Times and a film producer to capture footage of his experience serving overseas, his ability to do an amazing job just like anybody else. And that's what led to the Emmy nomination that was referenced in my introduction, as well as a really nice set of recognition from the White House News Photography. So my professional identity in many ways has obviously been shaped by the AMA. And it was a tremendous honor to be sworn in June as the 178th president of the association. And for me, the AMA has been an amazing platform to do advocacy for patients that have such little voice, to do advocacy for LGBTQ communities, which is a deep personal connection that I have as a gay man, to do advocacy for service members and for veterans and other marginalized groups. And I've been able to combine my role at the AMA with my day job, and I do have a day job. And my day job is to run the largest health philanthropy in the state of Wisconsin. We're the 15th largest in the nation, $500 million fund that we're able to give away significant dollars to support health all across the state. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Let me talk a few minutes about the AMA. And, you know, the AMA is a household name, right? Founded in 1847, the largest, most influential physicians organization in the US, headquartered in Chicago. And it's known for a number of important attributes. Adopting a code of medical ethics at its founding meeting in 1847 that articulates the values that still guide the practice of medicine today. And when I took the oath of office in June, I took the oath of office. I didn't swear in a Bible. I took the oath of office on a copy of the Code of Medical Ethics from the 1800s, a very fragile copy that my almost 4-year-old son tried to grab, but it all worked out okay. The AMA is an incredibly open and democratic organization, and that is actually where we draw such strength from. Because when I get on TV and I'm talking to a correspondent on CNN or the ABC Evening News, I'm not representing Jesse Ehrenfeld. I'm representing the physicians of America and our democratically decided policies voted on by our House of Delegates. And our House of Delegates meets twice a year. It's every state, every specialty, almost 600 voting members, including students, residents, young physicians. And there's something very special that happens. And this used to happen in Washington. Doesn't happen so much on Capitol Hill anymore, but it still happens at the AMA, which is when we have these policy meetings, people show up, people from all over the country with very different philosophies, opinions, cultural, religious, political backgrounds, and we argue, and we bring our best evidence for policies that we are debating and discussing. And there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of energy, we vote, and then people shake hands and go out to dinner. And it's the shaking hands and going out to dinner part that has been lost in Congress, unfortunately. That used to happen. That still happens at the AMA, and it's such an important component as we're establishing critical policies to guide the practice of medicine. And that enables us to heavily influence policy decisions about how medicine is practiced, patient safety at the state and federal level. And again, we've led or helped lead such critically important major public health initiatives around smoking, vaccines, opioids, automobile safety, and obviously a ton of work related to COVID-19. So the AMA, we call ourselves the physician's powerful ally in patient care because we represent the views of physicians in 3 important ways. One bucket is just trying to get rid of the things that get in the way of practicing medicine, expanding access to care, making the burdens of day-to-day practice, administrative burdens, ease. The second is leading the charge to confront public health crises, things like the rising burden of chronic disease, health inequities, emerging threats like a pandemic, COVID-19. And then the third bucket of great interest to you, I'm sure, driving the future of medicine through innovation, medical education, reimagining how we train future physicians and those in practice. Now, the AMA House of Delegates, and this is a picture from a ballroom at one of our recent meetings, 690 delegates coming together to deliberate. And what's beautiful about this is everybody's vote counts the same. And we have dozens of students with votes. The students have their own section meeting, and they bring forward such important policy as a critical part of that process. I won't dwell on this, but there are lots of ways that policies are generated, debated, brought forward, and ultimately filed for action or rejected. And a lot of our governance activity is tied to this process. And I hope when you all become medical students that you'll join the AMA and you'll learn about the inner workings of policy and join us on this journey. So for the past, couple of years, we've really had a huge burden on our backs because of COVID. And as we think about advocating for physicians and patients, we've kind of organized a lot of our key federal priorities around what we call our recovery plan for America's physicians. And there are 5 important areas. You can find more online or at the QR code. But the first is reforming a deeply flawed Medicare payment system that has not seen a real inflation update for physicians in 2 decades. 2 decades. It requires burdensome reporting of irrelevant quality measures, has yet to implement any dozens of the innovative payment models designed by physicians to improve quality, reduce costs. Physicians deserve a system with financial stability, automatic inflation-based updates that take in the fact that every year it becomes more and more expensive to run a practice. The second issue is supporting team-based care and stopping scope of practice creep. Physicians bring very unique skills, training, experience, expertise to bear on diagnosing and treating patients. And our patients count on that expertise, and they expect a physician will direct their care. The third issue is fixing prior authorization to get rid of the burdensome hurdles that insurers throw up in front of patients and doctors when they deny care that our patients desperately need. The fourth area is reducing physician burnout broadly and addressing the stigma around mental health access. And finally, supporting innovations like telehealth expansion, digital health, and AI tools. So again, you can check out the QR code if you're interested in learning more detail about those things. Now, every now and then, we get a really big win. And I wanted to share what an example of that looks like. So despite a lot of physician burdens, our recent win reminds me of the importance of advocacy as the most effective way to make a real difference for patients and physicians. Now, prior authorization, you all know what this is. It's when you have to fight with your insurance company to get things approved, routine medications, routine screenings, routine radiology things, hospitalization, surgeries. And it is so frustrating. It is an obstacle for physicians because it's excessive and it's overused. And we know that its use correlates with poor health outcomes. It harms patients. Anyway, we secured a federal rule from CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, that requires any government regulated health plan, anything sold on the exchange, Medicare, Medicaid, to reduce the timeframes for prior authorization decisions to publicly report metrics around how often things are denied, approved, how long, which is going to reduce care delays and improve transparency. The plans are also required to electronically do prior authorization that integrates with the electronic health record. Right now, I spend time faxing things, calling people back, sending emails. It significantly disrupts our workflows. And so to have a tight integration that automatically allows these things to happen is going to be really, really important. And we estimate, actually, the federal government has estimated this will save $15 billion to practices over the next 10 years. And And we're really excited to hopefully get this expanded through congressional action to every health plan, not just the ones that are federally regulated. Now, as I mentioned at the top, we live in a very divisive time in medicine. Just as in politics, a lot of it driven by attacks on science, well-coordinated misinformation campaigns, and we have a very comprehensive strategy to address medical misinformation, trying to ensure that evidence-based medical information, public health information is accessible. So we're working with publishers, researchers, the media to look at how are paywalls preventing people from accessing credible, important, valid information. We're trying to address disinformation that's disseminated by other health professionals on social media platforms by addressing how these things are monetized and incentivized, and educating physicians and other health professionals and the public on how do you recognize when something is disinformation and how do you play a role in stopping the spread. And obviously we want policymakers to do everything they can to limit the spread of disinformation, ensure there's accountability on the platforms and through media, and consequences for people who are harming the American public. We have urged the media outlets, influential social media companies to remain vigilant, to help their readers and viewers and listeners separate fact from fiction and reduce misinformation. And we believe very strongly that all of this can be accomplished while upholding important principles and freedoms guaranteed by the First Amendment. We actually got our start, if you think back in the 1800s, the AMA, by stamping out snake oil and quack remedies that endangered the public's health and greatly undermined the institution of medicine. And that's still one of our most important roles today, as we've seen a surge of attacks on science since the early days of COVID. Now, rhetoric, whether it's online, emanating from the mouth of someone in a position of power, has serious consequences on patient health. This was true all throughout the pandemic. You know, we had to push back on outrageous claims about unproven treatments like ivermectin in support of vaccine efficacy. And this all continues today. And unfortunately, all of this has contributed to a profound loss of trust in the advice of experts, including doctors and scientists, to help us make sense of what's happening and to make informed decisions about our health. It's my view that physician leaders have an obligation to push back on medical misinformation and disinformation and always stand on the side of science and evidence that are the underpinnings of the profession. And we've got to hold physicians accountable when they are deliberately spreading falsehoods online, and the AMA has been working with state licensing boards on all of that effort. So I thought I'd take a minute to look at some of the key policy issues for our students, our young physicians, and our residents and fellows. And there's a long list here, but a bunch of work on just trying to improve the experience of going through training, because it's hard. And we know that. We know that there are things that we can do to make it easier. We have a whole bucket of what I refer to as foundational equity policies, our work in declaring racism a public health threat, all of our work around policing reform and trying to protect populations against discrimination and harassment, trying to support safe and equitable access to voting, a foundational freedom in our nation, which has profound health implications. A ton of work around addressing burnout, depression, suicide, social media usage, the healthcare needs of our LGBTQ community. And I mentioned fairness in the national residency matching program when our students are trying to secure a residency position. The photo there is from one of our medical student lobby days. And we just had this 2 weeks ago today, where students from all over the country, several hundred, flew, drove, took the bus to Washington to meet with lawmakers and advocate for medical student priorities. So, you know, there's a lot on physicians' shoulders right now, a lot of drivers of dissatisfaction, a lot of drivers of burnout. And for me, it just creates a new urgency. A new urgency to use our power, to use our influence, to be the allies that patients and physicians so desperately need to execute a pretty simple and enduring mission, promoting the art and science of medicine and the betterment of public health. So, you know, medical schools today are important because the betterment of public health includes having a physician workforce that's diverse, as our society and our communities are diverse. Based on enrollment data from the AAMC, you know, the enrollment figures for diverse candidates have been promising, reflecting a growing interest in the profession and a potential pool of physicians to better reflect our increasingly diverse communities. So Black student enrollment up 9%, Latinx student enrollment up 7%, Asian student enrollment up 13%. And the last year that we have data for, 56% of medical school applicants were women. And women applicants have increased in all but 2 years since 2012. We know from research and personal experience that having diverse physicians in the workforce is so critical to caring for an increasingly diverse patient population. But unfortunately, the US Supreme Court's ruling that ended affirmative action is going to have a significant impact on medical education and diversity in medicine. We joined 40 other organizations in an amicus brief that was filed by the AAMC and urged the Supreme Court to take no action that would disrupt the admissions processes that our health profession schools have very carefully crafted, relying on long-standing precedents. And our brief was cited by the dissenting justices in their comments on the case. We believe that policies that permit race as a component of selection are critical to diversifying the healthcare workforce. This relates directly to the health of our country because we know that systemic and structural racism are major contributors to the health inequities that we see. Ameliorating racism has to be central to our workforce development strategy if we hope to make progress towards achieving health equity. So while our country continues to grow more and more diverse, historically marginalized communities have just been left behind on nearly every health indicator. A physician workforce that reflects the diversity of the nation is key to eliminating those health inequities. There's evidence that racially diverse care teams produce measurably positive health outcomes in patients from historically marginalized communities. Patients in minority communities demonstrate improved primary care management, adherence, better health behaviors when we have diverse care teams. And this was noted by Justice Jackson in her dissent, that racial concordance between high-risk Black newborns and physicians was associated with decreases in mortality. And the goal, to be very clear, is not that we create a system of racially segregated care, no, but a health workforce in which racial and ethnic representation is a more common aspect of our care teams. So a top strategic priority for the AMA is reimagining medical education, training, lifelong learning to help physicians adapt and grow at every stage of their career. We began this effort to reinvent medical education in 2013, recognizing that the old model, the model that trained me and so many others, is just hopelessly outdated. It hasn't kept up with the complex healthcare environment that we all have to function in. Not only were aspiring young doctors graduating without hands-on training with digital health tools that are defining this era of medicine, but they were beginning their career without really much understanding of how to work in a highly specialized, modern, fragmented healthcare system. Healthcare has evolved dramatically, and the way we were educating physicians was leaving them ill-prepared for the realities they would face. This paradox was not good for them, not good for their patients, not good for the healthcare system. But here's some good news. To date, the AMA has awarded $40 million in grants to some of our nation's leading medical schools and graduate medical education programs, the residency and fellowship programs, to advance innovation, foster creative problem solving, collaboration, provide aspiring doctors with the right training to thrive in the 21st century. Our undergraduate accelerating change in medical education consortium, it's got 37 medical schools in it now across 24 states that are training something like 25,000 students. A generation of doctors that someday are going to care for 40 million patients. Our Reimagining residency program now has 11 institutions. We've created a continuum of training to advance innovation and help us take on some of the most difficult public health challenges that we face. And while these initiatives, from the very beginning was about flipping the traditional construct, empowering students and faculty to redesign medical education from the ground up by incorporating the perspectives of students, trainees, and patients at the center and then building out. Let me talk a little bit about health equity. And we define health equity as optimal health for everybody. And the AMA recognizes racism as a major public health threat. It's also important to state that race is a social, not a biological construct. And we're doing a lot of things to achieve greater health equity, advocating for better healthcare access, research, data collection, promoting equity in care, increasing workforce diversity, trying to influence upstream drivers of health, voicing and modeling a commitment to health equity. In 2021, we released our comprehensive plan to embed racial justice and advance health equity in an ambitious multi-year strategy that has 5 approaches to tackle this work. Embedding equity and racial justice in everything that we do, building alliances with marginalized physicians and other stakeholders, pushing upstream to address drivers of health, the root causes of inequities, ensuring equitable structures and opportunities for innovation, and fostering pathways for truth, racial healing, and reconciliation. To advance that last pillar, we have a truth, reconciliation, healing, and transformation task force that's doing some really hard work. It's looking at our past and making recommendations to the AMA board about future efforts. We've met with Native American communities. We've met with so many stakeholders trying to understand how we can acknowledge the past and move forward. And since its creation in 2019, our Center for Health Equity, in addition to developing that multi-year strategic plan, has done a lot of things. They have an incredibly popular Prioritizing Equity webinar series. It is free, available online. Check it out. They've launched a medical justice and advocacy fellowship program. We've worked with Essence to create this Release the Pressure national campaign to improve heart health for Black women. We're a founding partner of the Rise to Health Coalition, a collaborative to advance racial justice in all of healthcare and so many other things. Of course, another important piece of this is educating physicians in practice. It's not just our trainees, our students or residents, but we've got hundreds of thousands, almost 1 million physicians in practice that need education. They need to understand, why do the inequities exist? How do we bridge those gaps? And unfortunately, that's information that a lot of people just never learned in medical school. So we've developed a really groundbreaking series of continuing medical education modules. They're on our education hub to better train students and physicians on the root causes of inequities, including racism, structural determinants of health. And we've got modules that have a deep dive on health equity, equity-centered innovation. Our AMA Journal of Ethics released a 2-part series on racial and ethnic equity. You can find it online. And I mentioned the Prioritizing Equity series that now has, I think, 30 videos that have a whole variety of insights from experts across the nation. So let me take a closer look about how we think about driving the future of medicine by improving both the design and real-world applications of health technologies. And we've learned a lot from our experience in electronic health records. In order to get the best out of digital tools, they've got to be designed better. And, you know, from our perspective, physicians have a critical role to play in this endeavor. Without our knowledge, expertise, and our guidance, even the most advanced promising innovations will fail because they'll be disconnected from the realities of our clinical workflows. So many opportunities to build a better system for patients and physicians, and we're focused on doing so. But before I delve deeper into that, I want to share with you a story that is deeply personal to me. And that's about my older son, Ethan, who just left as we started to go to piano class. This is pictures when Ethan was born. The photo on the left there, he was born at 29 weeks, weighed 1,100 grams, just over 2 pounds. And, you know, of course, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. It was in the middle of the night, a stat emergency C-section. My husband and I were in the hospital, but we couldn't be in the operating room because things happened so quickly. And when they were rushing Ethan from the operating room to the neonatal intensive care unit, they stopped for just a second. We looked at him. I took that picture on the left, and that's the first photo I have of him from just a few minutes after he was born. And Ethan spent 49 days in the NICU, and he needed a whole lot of technology to keep him alive and let him grow. Things that we take for granted: pulse oximeters, warm air incubators, wireless infusion pumps with remote monitoring. And fortunately, all of those things worked. But that hasn't always been the case. And the seamless application of those technologies happens today because of standards, because of standards that the AMA and others have championed to make sure that when we walk into a hospital, that the tools and technologies and drugs and medicines work. And a lot of this was started in the 60s by a surgeon named Joel Nobel, after a newborn literally died in his arms when a defibrillator just failed to work. And there's a very famous series of infant deaths because of electrocution and because of thermostat failure and overheating in incubators. That work of that surgeon ushered in a really important era of comparative evaluation of medical device brands, standards, and testing. And fortunately, Ethan's incubator did not overheat, kept him nice and toasty. This was a picture of him on the left, actually, at the beginning of January when we were going on vacation. He's reading his favorite book, Dogman, and his favorite board game is Scrabble. You can tell that he's 4.5 going on 5 by the word that he's spelling there on the Scrabble board. But we're very lucky. And when I think about the incorporation of AI and digital health into healthcare workflows, there's a really important lesson that we need to learn from another industry. And that industry is the airline industry. And Boeing's had a lot of problems lately. But the original major problem they had, a catastrophe, with the 737 MAX a few years ago, where 2 airliners tragically crashed and everybody died, was because of an AI safety system. And I'm not a pilot, but when Boeing created the 737 MAX, they put these larger engines on, and they had to mount them in a different spot on the wings so they wouldn't drag on the ground. And that creates more lift. And I don't know much about flying, but I know that lift is how you get up in the air. And so the aerodynamics of the 737 MAX are such that during normal flight, the nose has a tendency to pitch up because of the extra lift, the aerodynamics. Boeing recognized this, and they built an AI safety system called MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. And what it does is when it detects that the nose of the plane is going up gently, it just pushes it back down automatically, seamlessly in the background. That's fine until there's a sensor malfunction. And with those two doomed airliners, they were flying normally, but the sensor thought they were going up. And so it pushed them tragically into the ground. Now, the lesson here, the shocking lesson, is the pilots, the air crew of those airliners had no idea that this AI safety system existed. There was no training. It was not in the operations manuals. They had no awareness. The only way in any industry, but particularly healthcare, we can supervise, correct, and deal with problems is if we know that there's a system there doing something. The only way, if I have a ventilator in an operating room that I turn on, that's got an AI algorithm in it that's modifying ventilation parameters to try to optimize inflation pressures, the only way I can manage that, even if I have no idea what the algorithm is doing because it's deep learning and 1,000 parameters or whatever, is if I know the system's there. So that if something goes horribly wrong, I can turn it off, I can take over, I can go to some manual failure mode. Really important lesson. So look, we live in an AI era, you all know that. We're somewhere near the top of this peak of hype of inflated expectations curve. But there will be really important changes driven by AI and digital health technologies that you all will inherit when you become students and physicians. Now, the AMA does use the term augmented intelligence because we really think it's not about replacing anybody. It's about boosting the capability of our care teams to make sure that we are operating at peak performance, that we don't accidentally miss or forget to do something, but that we can benefit from the scale that technologies can bring. So that's why we don't use the frame artificial, but rather augmented. Now, when it comes to adoption of technologies, physicians' needs are quite simple. Does the thing work? Will I get paid if I use it? Will I be liable if something goes wrong? And will it work in my practice? And the AMA is doing a lot of work to try to create the right set of tools to influence innovation. And this chart shows our work in AI specifically, but it broadly applies to everything in digital health. Developing standards, common language, ethical principles, informing physicians about trends, providing funding for research, supporting the development and design of tools that work and integrate in our workflows, lots of things that we're doing. In 2016, the AMA founded a company called Health 2047. It's not a startup, it is an innovation studio in Silicon Valley, right across the street from Stanford, a wholly owned for-profit subsidiary to build, commercialize, and launch solutions to critical challenges that we see as physicians. And it's been a really important effort. They've launched about 12 companies at this point. We certainly have entered into this new era of AI, and the AMA has a lot of policy, a lot of education modules, theories in JAMA, our Journal of Ethics. And if you're interested in all of that work, you can find it conveniently curated on a page on our website. The AMA does a lot of survey work, and this is our most recent nationally representative survey on AI in medicine, the potential, the challenges. And we did this work in the summer of 23, we released it in the fall. And if you are interested and excited about AI, but also a little bit terrified, you're the same as 40% of practicing physicians. People see the promise. We want these things to make our lives easier. We want these things to make us better clinicians, diagnosticians, better able to manage the resources we have, but people are worried. They're worried about, how does it change my relationship with my patient? Does it interject bias into the care delivery process? How do I deal with concerns about patient privacy and access to information? So there's a lot on the table that we need to work through. The AMA is deeply engaged in trying to shape the regulatory approach to for AI tools in medicine, and what the FDA is going to do hasn't been decided, and it will heavily influence the tools that we have. To shape our policy framework, we launched in 2018 foundational policy on AI. We released a major update in 2023. Again, the QR code will take you there. The purpose of these principles is allow us to engage with policymakers. And they do a couple of things. I don't have time to go through all of it, but above all else, they say that healthcare AI has got to be designed, deployed, developed in a manner that is ethical, equitable, responsible, and transparent. And voluntary compliance with national governance policies is necessary, but it's not sufficient. We need regulation. And we need to have a risk-based approach where the level of scrutiny and validation and oversight is proportionate to the overall harm or consequences that an AI system makes. And most importantly, clinical decisions influenced by AI have to be made with a specific human intervention point where, as the potential for harm goes up, the point in time where I can utilize my judgment to interpret or act on a recommendation happens earlier in the care plan. So we have a lot of principles, but they really emphasize those human intervention points and this concept of having human-centered care. And some of you may know, he's very famous, Dr. Abraham Verghese. He's written several wonderful best-selling books. His first was called Cutting for Stone, and he's become a good friend. He's at Stanford. And he wrote about this, and he said that the way here is not to think technology versus the human, but ask how they come together, where the sum can be greater than the parts for an equitable, inclusive, human and humane care and practice in medicine. And I could not articulate that more clearly, and that's why I like to use Dr. Verghese's words. So I get asked a lot about large language models, ChatGPT, how are they going to change practice? And these things will have their day. We don't know what that looks like, but I will tell you, even the most advanced algorithms and AI tools cannot diagnose and treat disease. That's the wrong approach. You know, AI is great for the textbook patient solving a narrow question, but it can't substitute for the judgment, nuance, or thought that a clinician brings to the table. But AI and algorithms can help doctors, right? Imagine tools that integrate seamlessly into our electronic health records to provide predictive text for physician notes. And so large language models are having their heyday now, but they'll become really important at some point in the future. I do think it's important, though, to make sure that we recognize the perils of poorly designed technology. And the case in point here that should be pretty easy to understand is around pulse oximetry. And well described during COVID that because of the calibration problem, pulse ox overestimates oxygen saturation in people with dark skin tones. And because it reads higher than the number actually is, patients with dark skin tones during COVID were not getting oxygen, we're not being admitted to the hospital, we're not going to the ICU, and we're being harmed. The shocking thing isn't the miscalibration. The shocking thing is we've known about this. It is well described. It's in the literature. We've known about it for 30 years. And so we continue to call on the FDA to ensure greater accuracy in pulse oximeter readings for patients of all skin colors, to educate professionals about their limitations. But we cannot allow this to happen again. And so the AMA has taken on our Info Health initiative that is totally designed to advance equitable innovation in healthcare by establishing shared principles to understand how does racism, sexism, bias impact health innovation? How do we invest in health innovations from and for historically marginalized communities and work with industry to bring those things to the market? At the end of the day, we have to earn and keep the trust of our patients, We have to earn and keep the trust of physicians in these tools and technologies. So as I get to the top of the hour and I come to the end, what can the AMA do for you? We want to support you today. We want to protect your future. Short plug about membership so you know everything we can do for you and what we offer for students. Obviously, I would encourage you to check us out, see what we're working on, see what's important to you, what resonates with your pursuit of medicine. We are the largest medical association in the nation, nearly 53,000 medical student members, about half of every student in the country. Why do people like you join when they become students? They join to have an impact. They join to have an impact in shaping the future of the profession. The AMA is fighting to protect the investment you're going to make in your medical education, your training, and your future. Big picture, the AMA represents the profession with a unified voice, reducing administrative burdens, reforming payment systems, supporting physician well-being, fighting burnout, preventing scope of practice expansions. So as future medical students, one-day physicians, you're going to be in a position to use your voices for your patients, your communities, and your colleagues. And whether you become a member of the AMA or not, whether you take an active role in organized medicine or not, I'd urge everybody listening today to find your voice. Use it for whatever issue matters to you. Think of how will you use the power and the responsibility that you have to advocate for your patients? What matters the most to you? Reproductive rights, gender-affirming care, eliminating bias from the exam room, banning assault weapons, increasing funding for public health programs, reducing student debt. Our world is growing more complicated by the day. But whatever you choose, you won't be alone. You won't shoulder the weight of this on your own, because whatever matters to you is going to matter to a community of fellow future students. And when you're ready, you're going to find an ally in your corner to help you speak your truth to power. That's the work of the AMA. And it's people like you who make me so excited and so optimistic about the future of this proud profession. So thank you for having me. I hope I've been able to share in the last 58 minutes why I love the profession so much, why I think it's such an important part of making our world a better place and healthier. And I do hope someday you'll all be a part of organized medicine and someday part of the AMA. I know it's a lot of ground to cover, but I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
All right, we have our first question. Does the AMA do anything for physicians who did
I'm
not
listening.
match?
I'm just going to go get my little guy that woke up from a nap. Sorry, what was the question?
Does the AMA do anything for physicians who did not match?
We do. So, we have a whole series of things that we're trying to do to expand the training opportunities so that more students do match. Unfortunately, while we've brought lots of training programs online, medical schools have increased over the last decade, we have not kept up expansion with GME spots. And unfortunately, as many of you know, residency positions are primarily federally funded through Medicare, and they have basically been frozen since the 90s. That is ridiculous. We've brought all of these new schools online. Ashley, you can say hello to everybody. Say hi. We've brought all these new schools online, but we haven't expanded training spots. So it's a key advocacy area for us as we think about workforce shortages and the healthcare of the future that we need. We have programs and things in place to try to help unmatched students navigate some of the coaching resources, but it's really tough. It's really, really tough. I have mentees who haven't matched and watching the struggle. You've gone too far, you've paid too much to not have a place to practice. And obviously, at the root of all this is making sure that we've got training spots.
All right. So our next question is, what is the AMA doing in getting more residency positions to match the increase in medical school positions?
Yeah, so like I said, the number's been fixed since the 90s. It's a key advocacy priority for us. We did get a couple hundred additional spots. We need thousands more spots. So there's a bill that would add 2,000 spots a year for 7 years, so we get 14,000 more positions ultimately brought online permanently. There's bipartisan support for it, but I don't even know if we have a speaker still this morning because of the last set of votes overnight. It's even when Congress knows they need to do something, it's like obvious, everybody agrees, they just can't get it done. And that unfortunately is the case for a number of critical issues in healthcare, and that's why I'm on Capitol Hill a lot.
All right, next question. How do you think we could actually start as pre-meds in a community college? I think to kind of get involved with the AMA is the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So unfortunately, we don't have an easy, obvious place for folks to plug in who are not in school because we're a membership association. That being said, what I will say is probably 90% of our resources are free and available to everybody online. And one place that the AMA has been really helpful has been creating connections between current students and people who want to be students and physicians in practice with those who just don't have any connection to folks who can help mentor them. So if folks are looking for those kinds of resources, we're happy to point folks in the right direction.
How was being in the military during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and how did that impact you?
Well, it was very awkward. I could recount dozens of very strange situations, being hit on by women when I'm gay, or, can't really sort of deal with that sort of stuff. I had one of my unit commanders wanted to be friends with me on Facebook and kept sending me requests, and I kept denying them. And he finally called me out and he's like, why won't you accept my friend request? And I was like, I can't tell him because I'm gay or see me and my friends doing stuff. I was like, sir, I don't think that's going to be helpful. I mean, what do you say to that? So for me, it was definitely a challenge. I will tell you, I've been through a lot of mandatory training in a lot of settings, in a lot of places, from the annual fire safety to research to stuff in the military. The most thoughtful, well done mass training exercise I've ever encountered was when the military trained every service member in person. The Secretary of Defense had to certify that the forces had been trained. It was a big deal on the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It was so well done. I've never seen anything like this at any point in my career. And it was a huge, huge undertaking to have instructor-led in-person conversations with every service member across the globe. And that was a pretty special moment. I still remember I was in Newport, Rhode Island going through this training, just being in awe of how thoughtful, how well put together that experience was as we obviously moved into a new era.
Okay, next question. How do you balance work, fatherhood, and leadership?
I am really lucky. First of all, this is Asher, by the way. He's 15 months, just while correcting that. I'm at a point in my life.
He's going to help you answer some of the questions.
The tough questions go to this guy. So I'm at a point in my life where I travel a lot because of, AMA work and representation stuff. But on a routine day when I'm at home, I don't take meetings before 8:30, and I don't schedule things after 4:30. And that allows me to get up with this guy, make pancakes for Ethan, the other one, help get them settled to school, the nanny, all that stuff, and be home at the end of the day to help set the table, have dinner, bedtime, bath, and all those things. And I recognize, I'm a pretty, I'm I'm 45, but I'm pretty senior in my career in terms of my roles, my titles, my positions, and I have that luxury. And I know that when you're early in your career, you may not always have that option of saying no to somebody who wants to meet with you at 5 o'clock. But for me, that's been a really, really important way to prioritize the family.
And an understanding
I also
spouse, too,
rarely
right?
do things on the weekends. You guys are special.
And having an understanding spouse too, right?
My husband is superhuman and amazing. And look, I will tell you, I traveled 200 days last year. A lot of stuff in DC. The AMA presidency is a year. I mean, it's 8 years on the board, president-elect, past president, all that stuff. But there is one intense year, and we knew coming into it what this would mean and what it would look like, and the challenges. And my older son Ethan is often like, "Daddy, why do you have to be the president of the AMA? Why can't you just come home?" And I FaceTimed him from San Diego yesterday and Phoenix the day before. But I know that if we don't have somebody out there as a strong leader advocating for the profession, that there may not be a healthcare system to take care of this guy. Putting us as a gay couple aside, there's just so much challenges, so many workforce issues, so much stress. 83 million patients do not have access to a primary care doctor today. 83 million. And it's going to get worse. If you look at the physician workforce shortage projections. So for me, it's a deeply personal passion to do it, and but I'll be glad to hand it off come the summer.
I have another question. With such physician and nurse shortages, why are we not training more doctors, and what is the AMA currently doing for it?
Yeah, so again, we've brought a ton of medical schools online. That's good. We need more residency physicians. That would help. We also need more flexibility for foreign trained physicians, and 25% of physicians practicing in the US today were trained abroad. 25% are international medical graduates. We have a huge reliance on international graduates, right, for care needs. But the immigration system's a mess. So if you come in on a J1 visa and you do residency in the US and you learn all our systems, right? It's not just the medicine. It's how do I actually get patients home care? How do I actually get them admitted to, rehab? All of the inner workings of our system that is a horrible mess. You learn all that, right? Because you're a resident and you deal with it. We require under immigration law, physicians on a J1 visa to leave for 2 years before they can come back and practice, unless you can get a waiver. Silly. People know it's silly. There's bipartisan support in Congress to enhance the waiver program to allow those physicians who have just finished training to stay in practice. But immigration is hard, and Congress hasn't moved, even though there's bipartisan support. So we're coming at it from a bunch of different angles beyond just expanding the number of training positions, which we need to do to satisfy those workforce needs.
Yeah, I knew I work in the ER as a tech, but I know one of our residents who finished a residency in emergency medicine, which, and then she couldn't get her green card, and it was such an issue. So she just went right up to Canada, and she's now practicing, and she, she's happy as a. And I'm like, so what if you to come back to the US? She's like, I'm not coming back. So
yeah, what a loss for us. What a loss for that community, your community. I don't know where you live, but somebody
Oakland.
who obviously, would have obviously been a great contributor to the care needs. Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah, this is also a big problem. Also, same thing with Silicon Valley too. That I live in the Bay
Yeah.
Area, San Francisco Bay Area, so it's yeah, this is a big,
Yeah, and we're
huge.
we're we're in a little bit of a battle with some of the tech industry over these waivers and who's getting what and this and that, and unfortunately, immigration is a challenging subject on a good day when Congress is well behaved, let alone this past year. So we continue to push, but we just haven't gotten much movement lately.
All right, we got another question. We know the Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, has put a strong emphasis on loneliness, but what is the AMA doing it for pre-med, medical students, and physicians?
Yeah, so we have a whole work stream in a business unit solely dedicated to supporting practices, physician wellness, eliminating burnouts, and reducing stigma when it comes to accessing behavioral health. I'll give just a couple examples. So it's been standard for decades when you apply for a medical license or to get privileges at a hospital that you fill out a credentialing form. And on that credentialing form, there's this age-old question that is something like, have you ever now or at any point in your life seen a therapist, been in therapy, had psychiatric counseling, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what happens if you check that box? Well, my friend in residency, wonderful resident, chief resident, in a different program, different specialty, she graduates, she'd seen a therapist in high school. She's a very well-functioning, high-functioning individual, no current issues, impairment, whatever. She checked the box because she was being truthful, and her license was held up for 9 months. And this is what happens. People know it happens. People know that if they disclose that it will threaten their ability to get a license. It will threaten their ability to practice. So what do? People don't get help. There's already so much stigma around getting behavioral health services. And then if you know that it might threaten your livelihood, people don't do it. We know from surveys, 40% of physicians who said they knew they needed help didn't get it because they were worried about answering those questions. So we're working with the Lorna Breen Healthcare Heroes Foundation nationally to go state by state to get rid of these questions. Facility by facility, we've had huge progress. But it's one example of a policy issue that has a profound impact on behavior and access to people getting what they need. So there's a lot in that portfolio, but that's just one really good example.
Another question that we have is, we've heard from older physicians that working long hours makes better doctors, but now there's a push for less hours. Would I be a good doctor if I work less?
I don't know how to answer that question. The training paradigm continues to evolve. Since I was a resident, there have been work hour restrictions. So 80 hours is the cap for physicians. They don't want more than 24 hours on call. A lot of programs have eliminated 24-hour call entirely. I think those are important adjustments. They make sense. The challenge is when you then go into practice, making sure that we prepare our senior residents to then face the reality of being on call every other night if they're in a 2-person neurosurgery practice in a rural community. And so, I don't know what the answer to that is. There are a lot of policy questions, and I was seeing debates on that point on Twitter yesterday with some data that came out from ACGME about the number of hours worked by specialty and residency. Clearly, the goal is to make sure that people have the right competencies when they graduate from training to practice. And it shouldn't be an endurance test. But we also need to make sure that we have balance, recognizing that there's the reality of what it's like to be in practice in a variety of settings.
All right, next question. You talked about the importance of diversity in health. Now we are hearing about the ban for DEI in medicine. What would happen to the progress and how do we stop it?
I know that there is some legislation that was introduced. We haven't commented on it. I don't think it's likely to move forward. You know, there's a lot of questionable legislation that gets introduced in Congress every day of the week. But certainly we're committed, right, to our principles around ensuring equity in education and health equity around medicine. So, you know, there will always be policy barriers. There will always be policy opportunities. The example I gave around the Supreme Court decision from last summer is a good example of that. That doesn't mean that we are giving up on having diverse candidates apply to medical school. It just means that there'll have to be a different set of strategies to ensure that we get the outcome we need.
And the only thing I would add is like you as a student have a voice, you know, contact your legislators. That's your right, even though, yes, you may not carry as much weight as the AMA, but you still have a voice to call up or write a letter or email or even visit your local legislator, you know, offices. And if that you're really passionate about this, get involved with campaigns and make sure candidates that are in those positions of power, you know, actually do have your best interest. So
Fully support engagement. It's absolutely critical.
there's one question that I'm going to ask this one is a lot of people that are first gen have this fear of going through medical school and residency and not being able to find a job, or is that a big crisis that is happening now, or you will be able to work?
Look, the only people I have ever seen struggle to find a job are people that should never have been allowed to graduate from medical school. And look, there's a few in every crowd, right? And there are complex reasons why that happens. But there's so many demands. There's so many needs that AI is not going to replace us. We're going to need AI to help us, and we're going to need many, many, many more physicians in the workforce to address the huge challenges and the gaps in care between what we can deliver and what we need to deliver. So I rarely see that happening. I mean, look, you may not be able to get the dream job in Manhattan doing the thing exactly that you wanted, but you'll never go hungry as a physician, right? There's always somewhere that you can work and make a good living and do something that's meaningful. And that's what's so special about this profession.
Yeah, I've heard the say that the only doctors that are unemployed is the ones that choose to be. Who don't want to
I
work.
believe that. I believe that. I believe that.
I have another question. Post-Dobbs, the push is going towards more birth control, IVF, and other reproductive healthcare issues. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, we're deeply engaged. We were very disappointed by the Dobbs decision and the strange Supreme Court thing out of Alabama with, you know, the IVF case. We sprung into action immediately, and I think it was 9 days, which is unprecedented. We're able to work with the Medical Society of Alabama to get a law introduced, passed, and signed by the governor to rectify the situation. That only happens through tight coordination, deep policy, legal expertise, and fortunately, we're able to bring that to bear, particularly in the reproductive healthcare space. But as you all know, it's you know, it's a state by state sort of battle, and it's not straightforward for patients to figure out where they can access care. It's not straightforward for physicians to always know what they're allowed to do. You know, when the Dobbs decisions dropped, we had lots of physicians calling their attorneys asking, you know, I don't know what to do, and that's never a position that we want to be in, right?
All right, one more question here. Where do you see medicine in the next 10, 20, 30 years and the challenges you see in it?
Workforce. There's just so much pressure on everybody. Everybody's hair is on fire. We're never caught up. And the only way that we're going to solve this is by reimagining how we deliver care and improving the number of patients who can be served by the existing workforce. Oh my goodness. Yes, you just want to grab daddy. I know. It's playtime. It's playtime.
You know what? I think the little guy's getting anxious, so we're gonna.
Well, guys, thank you so much. Not just for having me. This was a treat. But for all of the work that you're doing to create this so important and special community, and anything that we can do at the AMA to help you all in your journey, know that you can count on us.
Yeah, thank you again. Bye. But yeah, we don't want to we don't want to hold you up. I think thank you. I know that when I was speaking with your assistant Lisa, she was like, he doesn't do a lot of stuff on the weekends. And so, but
this is why. This is why. Of course.
Yeah, no, and so we're really appreciative that you were able to make time for us and answer our questions. And we don't want to hold up the little guy because he's like.
We've got a squirmy wormy who's ready for a snack. Anyway, have a great weekend, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.